All right, so let's call this meeting to order. And first, we'll take this moment for public input. And citizens at this time may address the committee on items of school business not on the agenda. The committee will take such items under advisement without action at the meeting during which the item is presented. Do we have any public input? No? Alrighty, so we are going to just rearrange this, the agenda a little bit to accommodate poor Gail, who is not well.
Lessen the impact.
Yes,
of
no,
these
exactly.
being
And no
days.
breathing outward, please. And just, you know.
All right, so National Honor Society, please.
What?
You ready?
Let's go. Let's go.
What?
We make it happen.
Okay, thank you so much. So, just to introduce ourselves again, my name is Beth Sancher, and I am the advisor to the students for the National Honor Society. And this is Gail Duffy. She is.
I have a very low voice. I'm the faculty council chair.
So, we were here in December, and we were asked to do a little bit of reformatting. So, we are here to represent to you our proposal. So just as a reminder, the Medfield High School National Honor Society, the requirements follow the 4 pillars of the National Society organization: scholarship, service, leadership, and character.
So, we spent quite a bit of time with this, but we really went back and met for quite a long time, again, not for the first time, but for the second or third time, with all the members of the faculty council for the National Honor Society. And we had originally come to you with a 3.8 unweighted, and we sort of went through and we weighed every possible scenario out with them. And I want you to know that what we've come to with you tonight is a unanimous proposal from the faculty council. So I think it's important that you know that. So all of the votes were in, and after much going back and forth and a lot of really thoughtful deliberation, we're here to present our proposal tonight.
So we wanted just to recap how we got to this idea. So last spring, after the National Honor Society Faculty Council had met to review the applications, we had a conversation and we had talked about would it be possible to even raise the GPA. So we met with the administration in the spring, and we were given the go-ahead to kind of make movement with this. So we met again as a faculty council. So the faculty council consists of Gail Duffy, Russ Becker, Kathleen Emerson, Sarah Rodenai, and Diane Lyon. I am the student advisor, so I'm a non-voting member. So we met, we gathered information from surrounding communities, and then we continued our ongoing collaboration with the administration, which consisted of Dr. Marsden, Mr. Parga, Ms. Mendoza, Stephanie Worthley, Gail, and myself. So after our last presentation, we went back to the faculty council and we shared the information and your concerns. And we went over a few of the things that you had brought up, and we decided that, based on the continued feedback, to re-propose a 3.6 weighted instead of a 3.8 unweighted.
So there are quite a few reasons that we did this. I think it's important, just like you're here tonight, because any organization that doesn't examine itself is at a standstill. And we're like any organization that we hope has some forward motion. We had not really looked at or made any change at all to anything in the National Honor Society since 2002. And yet every year when we went over the applications, we would put sticky notes on our application process to remind ourselves of what seemed contentious or what didn't seem to work. And so in years past, it used to be that originally NHS was if you had no grade lower than a B minus. But for the past 18 years, we've worked off the 3.3 unweighted. But I think it's important, just like you're here tonight, to look at what's working and what needs to be tweaked. Beth and I have been doing this, I've been doing this for 18 years. You've been doing it for how long?
13.
13 years. We're pretty intimate with the process and really think that these changes are in the best interest of this organization. And they've been very thoughtfully gone through.
So going back to the 3.6, we decided a 3.6 weighted GPA is a more reasonable reflection of the true academic excellence which is represented by the Medfield High School National Honor Society. One of the issues that was brought up last time is how does this fit in with the Challenge Success program and the great strides we're making in the social emotional learning. But we had Robert reach out to our liaison at Challenge Success, and we did spend a great deal of time going over this, and we came to the agreement that NHS is a place where this true academic distinction should be recognised and celebrated, and the Challenge Success people were in agreement with that.
And it's kind of an overlay of the mosaic of everything that is this school. I mean, it is a piece of the school, but it is not the only piece of the school. But I do think it is an important piece of the school.
So we just wanted to present you how this will now change. So there'll be 3 main changes. The first change I've decided upon is the timeline, the weighted GPA, and the GPA eligibility. So we'll just move on to that.
We thought this was a good slide to show you because this, for students that are going to graduate from 2020 to 2023, everything is exactly as it was. This change is going to be slow, communicated thoughtfully and thoroughly, and doesn't even begin until students, we will begin with the students that will graduate in 2024. In addition to the kind of shift in the GPA, another large positive to this is that juniors and seniors will be eligible for this. We've had sophomores eligible, but it's very, very hard for them to get the service hours and leadership requirements. And having them go in and be notified the first week in September, plus we're going to have meetings with them all along, so they'll know. We'll give them more time to accrue the service hours and leadership components that they need in addition to the GPA. I think you can follow along on the sheet, and I think it's pretty easy. So the big shift will be, and not till 2024 graduation and then beyond, would be that they would still be able to put National Honor Society on their application to college. So there'll be really no change there, which is good. But we will also change when we are doing the induction ceremony. That's going to take place in November, and right now it takes place in May. Happy to answer any more questions on that slide after I cough.
So just to clarify, this does not affect any of the students currently in the high school. We realized when we met last time, after we'd met last time, is that when we first started talking about this, we were talking about the current 8th graders. Well, now they're the current 9th graders. So we decided, so it made perfect sense to us to keep it as the 9th graders because that's how we had been talking about it for the past year. So now we've decided to go back to our original game plan and just started with the current 8th graders. So they'll have no knowledge of the NHS until they get here now this coming September. And as Gail mentioned, I'm going to meet with them the first week of school, introduce what National Honor Society is. And even though they won't get a chance to apply until they're juniors, they can put that in their hat and kind of figure out, like, what do I need to do for service? How can I get these leadership hours? And part of my goal with my officers at the time would be to provide interested students with service and leadership hours in preparation for their application that year.
And also to let them know what kind of hours count. In other words, that that anything that you get paid for on the outside cannot count for service. but so many other things are unpaid things. You could accrue that from your freshman year on.
So the weighted GPA, last time we came to you, we talked about an unweighted GPA, and we currently work with an unweighted GPA at the 3.33. But after lots of math people have looked at this, we are decided, and we're quite confident, the move into a weighted GPA will, and this goes back to the question that was brought up by Campbell, that move into a weighted GPA will allow for students who take honours, C1 and C2 classes an opportunity to be considered eligible. It makes it more fair across the board. So, so just for clarity's sake, we are proposing a 3.33 unweighted, move to a 3.6 weighted. And then just to recap, this is all in accordance with the National Honor Society bylaws. Okay, we're good.
Any
Right.
questions?
Thank you, coming back. I'm wondering about, how are the numbers gonna shift in terms of, with the new criteria?
So-
What was it before? You know, it's interesting because you know, the patch came out earlier this week with the honor roll. I still don't know what qualifies a high honor and an honor roll. Does anyone know?
High honor is all A, and
Okay.
honor is nothing below a B.
Okay, all right. So, I'm assuming all those folks will get invites, but essentially, what is the change that'll happen in terms of numbers?
So, we looked at the numbers, and it only takes the application numbers down by about 8%.
Okay, all right. And none of the other criterias have been?
None of the other criteria will be changing. Nope.
Okay.
We have 20 hours of service that is required to apply, and then they have to maintain 20 hours each year. They have to be able to provide evidence of leadership, however that is translated to them, and they have to be in good standing with the school and have good character. So the only thing that is changing is this.
Yeah. So what's great is that everyone's got, it sounds to me, and I'm not a math person, but equal advantages between the kids who C2 is their challenge and they can still.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Now, with the new criteria, I didn't know if you went down into the weeds at that point, but do you think as many C2, C1 kids would qualify for Honor Society with the new criteria?
Yes, because they are all under the same application process. So if they're getting an A in a C2 class, then yes, or a B, or, you know, it
Yep.
depends on their individual grades. So they're not penalized for being in a C2 class at all, which is something we would not want.
Yeah, okay. You folks,
Well, I definitely appreciate you guys coming back and revisiting all that. I know that the first time was kind of a shaky. But given that this all started because I think one of the reasons that you were at conferences and noticed that comparably we were much lower. And I know there was a slide, and I had asked Jeff about this earlier, but obviously it didn't, it wasn't soon enough. But I would be interested to see if we could see comparable school districts.
So
I know last time it was like, we didn't know if they were weighted, if they were.
So
5.0.
we didn't put it in a slide because we didn't want to be comparing apples and oranges, but we do have all the information.
Right.
Stephanie actually reached out to her counterparts at several schools, and we were able to get the data for about 19 schools in the surrounding area.
Okay.
A school had compiled the information
Okay.
previously, and we made some phone calls to some other schools that weren't on there, and so we got the data for about 22 schools in total. And it seems that I think except for 2 schools, everybody is sort of weighted, which pushed us into this kind of concept that this is what we needed to be doing too.
Right, and is there any way that we can see that?
Can we share it? I don't, it's not mine, so
Oh,
I
okay.
don't,
You send it to me and I can.
Yeah, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, perfect.
And I do, to your point, I do think, I mean, I don't have a child that's gone through the process, so this is all new to me. But it would seem to me that someone could feasibly be on the honor roll and yet not be invited to the honor society. And that to me seemed like,
But I think that goes back to the mosaic of what I was saying, in the sense that maybe you are on the honor roll, but your leadership or your service hours aren't there. So there was a recognition for the academic hard work and excellence, but this has more components than
Right,
just
but
that.
I'm saying you can't even be invited to apply to
Without
be
the
denied
leadership
without
or
that
service.
GPA, yeah.
Well,
No,
you're saying about,
You're only invited with the GPA.
Right, and someone can be on the honor roll
Yeah.
and not
Mhm.
make the
but
GPA
not if you aren't in
requirement.
high honors, I think is what you're saying. If you're not in high honors, which is the A and above, because it's
No,
really
No, you
kind of
can get on
custody
here
that
with
GPA.
Without
honor
giving
roll.
any privacy away.
No, no, you
My
don't
son
have
has a
to.
3.5, he made the honor roll. He would not be invited into the honor society. So that seems to me a juxtaposition.
But I think when you see the spreadsheet, you'll see it's in keeping with the other
Okay.
towns.
Okay.
And maybe that will
But then, yeah, that's just
be
like
a help to
information
you.
that I
Maybe
needed in
that would
order
be a
to
help to you,
kind
yeah.
of swallow it.
I think it's important that everyone is rightfully recognized, and I think the honor roll does that. And then to have this in addition, I think that just as certain clubs appeal, I mean, I do, having done this for as long, I've taught since my hair was longer than my skirts, literally. And I think the beauty of a high school is, especially this one, is that there really is a place, a caring place for people. But I think there's a thoughtful place for people as well. And to me, with the honor roll and then this, I think there is a place for hard-earned academics. And this is just a higher level of that with the service and the leadership as well, rolled into it.
So, I don't want to step on you, actually,
Hmm?
because it's in the, it's linked. I just wonder, it seems like very good progress from where we were. I like what you say, re-examine yourselves every once in a while in the scholarship, service, leadership, and character. Do you have, if that's, is that really what we're saying, that's what it takes to be part of?
Yes, and we examine all 4 components of every single student that applies.
Students write essays that are, Campbell could tell you, they're quite
Multiple.
involved. And for the character and the essay, as well as getting signature sign-offs. But every essay, like, we want to do a good job on this. And every person on the faculty council, each essay gets read twice. And there are a total of 3 essays, correct?
Yeah, 3
3
essays.
So each essay gets read twice. And we had how many people apply last year?
164.
164. It's a long day.
And
And
how
it's
many
really
got in
done
of the
thoughtfully.
164?
Hmm?
Of the 164, all the
Roughly,
seniors got in, all of the juniors got in, and I think it was 78% of the sophomores got in.
It's hard for the
17.
sophomores.
78.
78.
It's really the service and the leadership, and that's why we think this will give them some extra time to get that in, so that, in a way, I think the numbers will wind up being more reflective of more people.
Yeah, where I was going was just, and it may create churn, so the one of them is purely binary, right? You get to the grade point or not.
That's-
whether you
and
do
that's
not.
the initial
And
step.
for the kid who's outstanding in those other areas, that one is purely binary. And it is, you don't want to create churn, but that would be the only thing, is what happens, if you want to, in our SEL meetings, we've been talking about, I think something that is an interesting topic. In elementary school, so much of the rewards and recognition is around character. And as we kind of move into middle school and high school, it becomes, no one's doing it on purpose, but more about that academics, and sometimes the perception of even the athletics.
And I think it goes-
And I'm not saying that, but I'm just like that.
But
I wonder, oh, sorry.
That is
One
the
of-
one thing, without, I'm not
Yeah.
challenging at all, I'm more saying, representing that even as we announce this out, as we roll it out, and saying, look, we do want to.
One of the, oh, go-
I'm sorry, because I do think that, I mean, look at the time you spent on your application and the time that we spend going over it. And the GPA is the sort of door opener, but the essays and the service have to be there too. So it does celebrate the things that you're talking about from the social emotional.
Right,
And one of the
but it's
things
the
we
door
do-
shutter too.
Right.
It's
Well, one
closing
of the
that
things
door.
we
You
talked
don't
about
even
as
get-
well is that it won't really be a door shutter if the students are appropriately placed. And I know that we make great efforts in all of the departments in the high school to make sure that the students are placed appropriately. So given the work with the SEL and the appropriate placement, the students should be at that level of where they are achieving their best self.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I more, I raise it just, I think it's the first slide, because I thought of National Honor Society, my head immediately thinks about academics. That's the first thing I think about. And looking at it, I see scholarship, service, leadership, and character. I think that's fantastic. Maybe it's just saying, hey, as we think about how we might announce this to the, you know, the schools and the community, acknowledging that, you know.
Okay.
It's not all about the grades. It might, in some ways, reduce some of the churn, right? I'm not questioning something that's unanimous by people who've been doing this for a long time.
It's a long time.
I think it is, you know, service, leadership, character. I think some of those other things are good to reinforce.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Campbell? Do you have any thoughts or comments?
I think that was a great improvement. I kind of like the weighted.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to kind of keep the continuity across like different levels of classes. But you know, others may see it differently, kind of with the honors and all. But I think if you do push yourself to take a harder course, there should be some recognition for that. So I do appreciate that, because I think there are a lot of students, especially in Medfield, who push themselves to the AP or the honors. It might not score that high grade that they would have scored in a C1, but should still kind of get that recognition for the. So I think that's great.
Awesome, thank you.
I know it's very unconventional, but we're fortunate enough to have 3 other high schoolers, and I didn't know if you guys wanted to chime in. This is so totally not what we're supposed to do, but.
I guess one thing that I was thinking about was just if the 3.6 is seen as a door shutter, I was just thinking about how we already have the 3.3 in place, so in some ways like that could be seen as a door shutter too. So I guess like my question is, what is the difference between moving the door shutter up a little bit? You know, like I feel like it'd be different if there wasn't any, if it was like a totally holistic approach already, but since there is already a grade minimum, I think it's like not totally unreasonable to move it a little bit.
And my point was, just, as you say, we re-examine every once in a while.
Right.
Right? May there ever be that case where you say, you know what, this kid is amazing, he or she, this is really important to them.
And that's
You know,
why,
I
just
wish you could be at the meeting.
Just going back to those other components, like we agonize over these essays. Like Gail said we read them twice. Some of them we read about 4 times. That are students. We have a rubric how we match up their essays and their points. And there are some students, we sit there, and Kathleen can speak to this, being on the
She's
committee. We'll go back and we'll be like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? You know, what do you think? And we'll say, you know, yeah, like we are more on the side of, yes, they did what they needed to, then, no, we're not going
I
to.
think, and you're saying those, as those that apply, and generally speaking, you know, those that the doors open,
Yeah,
you agonize over, but many
And
of them
with,
will get-
also for.
right, because we
any-
want them to get in, you
Right.
know?
Any student that, usually sophomores, that don't get in because of a service or a leadership thing, I sit down and meet with them for about 15 minutes each, so that it isn't, I mean, we try to make the letter as nice as possible, but it is more than that. It's us sitting down and sort of giving pointers and going over where to dial up on the application for next year. And I think it almost goes without form that the next year they all get in.
Yeah, no, that part.
And I think it's a lot of that is due that they had more time, but also I think the meeting helps, to tell you the truth.
I just want to thank you
Yeah.
for being so thoughtful and coming in, you know, the first time and being like, hey, we're going to present this and this is our best judgment. And then hearing how Campbell felt and kind of how we perceived it, even as both the school committee members who were concerned with the student population, but also as a reflection of parents of different kids, and how elegantly you folded in that feedback.
Thank you, I appreciate
really
that.
And with a
appreciate that.
baritone
I do.
voice. With my baritone voice, very low and nice.
I do appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Yes, and
Thank
this
you.
is
I'd like to see this as a collaboration.
Thank you.
It's great.
because you did not have to come to us. I mean, we don't have to approve
Right.
this, so this was a courtesy that you extended to us,
I
so
think it's
thank you.
important because you represent the community.
Yeah, no, but it was thoughtful, so
Mhm.
thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be well. Great, so we're changing up orders, and I want the students to be able to get home, so you guys are next. Who wants to go first? Okay.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Panciaco, and I'm the representative for the class of 2023. So, as I mentioned last meeting, as student government, we did a fundraiser at Papagino's to try to raise some money for our class. We did not make as much money as we wanted to. We only made about $150. It's okay, because it's $150 more than we already had, which is good.
Good attitude.
But we are planning on doing another fundraiser in the spring. Also, many people in our grade, we just got a new bio teacher. We really love her. She's extremely approachable and seems to always want to help us out, which is really nice. And along with bio, I was talking to many people in my grade, and we all love math lab and in the writing center. We think that's really helpful. And many were wondering if there's any possible way we could do something like a science lab, because I know bio is, at least for the freshmen, it's one of the most difficult courses for this year. And I think that many kids in the whole school, but I think they would find this a science lab really beneficial. And other than that, it's been a good start to term 3. I know the schedule change was kind of confusing, honestly, because I walked into the wrong classroom once. But we got the hang of it, and I can't believe the school year is already halfway over. It's insane. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. That was really great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I do.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Hello, Ms. White.
Hello, my name is Carrie White, and I'm the representative to the school committee for the class of 2022. Some exciting news is that student government has made a good amount of progress on our fundraiser. So we've decided to partner with Bowl Boys for a fundraiser. It is something that has never been done at Medfield, but we're super excited because we think it will be a huge success. We've reached out to them and had a phone call during one of our meetings about the overview of our plan, but we are now finding dates to meet in person with them for a meeting, and also a date for them to come to Medfield, and it's going to be like a event type thing, but we haven't really.
These Bowl Boys?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a food truck.
The place in
Oh,
Kohler?
food truck.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with it.
Yeah.
They really are.
It's like a food truck that has acai bowls. Yeah.
Yeah, I love good acai.
So this will most likely be in the spring. We haven't put out any details or information about it yet since we're still planning everything out, but hopefully we'll know very soon after those meetings. This week, Student Council sold wooden hearts at lunches, and I know many of the sophomores contributed by donating and sending hearts to their friends, so we're excited to get them during 7th period tomorrow. Winter sports are coming to an end, which is sad for many students in the class of 2022, but many of us are already getting ready for our spring seasons, which is crazy. And lastly, as far as academics, the class of 2022 has had a little bit of a heavier workload because our teachers tend to try and load things up before vacation, but nobody seems to be too stressed out. And other than that, the sophomores are doing very well, and we're all super excited for break next week. Thank you for listening.
Beautiful, thank you.
Carrie?
I think Bowl Boys is genius,
Yeah.
genius.
Really cool. Yeah.
Hey, Ella.
My daughter loves that place.
I totally use some They're tracking them on the app.
So I'm Ella Kohler, and I'm the representative to the class of 2020. So for our student government, right now we've still been planning our ice skating event, which I think I mentioned a little bit last time I was here. But basically we're renting an ice rink for all the seniors as part of our senior gifts. because we had a good amount of extra funds. So we're going to try to do that, and also something small, probably still about making the cafeteria more environmentally friendly with the environmental club, so that's good. In terms of our grade, not a ton of big events have happened recently. Since the last meeting, we've had midterms. A lot more people have found out where they're going to college, which is kind of fun. And many more will be hearing back from schools in March. Winter sports are coming to a close. And we also have our due dates for our senior projects tomorrow, so a lot of kids have been finalizing plans and discussing with teachers. So that will be a pretty big change to their schedules in term 4. So if you're not familiar with senior projects, it's just students who have kind of like individual interests can spend part of or most of the school day doing something separate. Sort of like some kids will like write books with their friends or volunteer somewhere or do an internship, and they have to like kind of balance their classes with that, but it's kind of a unique experience for kids who want to pursue something like special to them. And the only other area of improvement that I kind of been thinking about lately was just the dialogue between students and teachers. I've been in some classes where I feel like students sort of collectively have things that they'd like to change, but because it's not too big of an issue, they're not going to go to guidance or like talk to someone, but they're just small things that could make the learning more effective, I think. So I just think that if there was some kind of more consistent feedback method between students and teachers, that could be an effective way to kind of improve learning on like a small level.
Have you had an experience of feedback? I know, because I know like Mr. Barrows, he checks in,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers will do like a form right at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, which I think is helpful, but I think it's tough because those students who just reflected on it are going to be gone. So
For sure.
the things that will help them the most, it's too late for them, you know? So I don't know, something like a little bit more consistent, maybe like a term thing would be kind of nice. And if every teacher did that, I feel like.
Awesome.
Have you ever thought of like something informal? Like there's a spot you can go for suggestions? You know,
Yeah.
that just,
I think that some teachers are more approachable than others, so I think that with some teachers it's easy to just mention something that you want to change, but with other teachers it's a little bit harder to do that, so.
If it was formalized, it would be a practice that everyone would do. Yeah.
you know, like there was almost like suggestions, and in a way, it's almost anonymous. You just, hey, if you ever have
Right.
something, you could just raise it. People don't.
How many of your teachers approximately do like midterm check-ins or just, you know, earlier on versus the very end of the year?
I think in my experience, I've only had them be at the end. I had Mr. Barrows, so I did have his Google form at the end of taking the class. And I also think last year I had a couple different things to fill out. I don't know if you have had those experiences, but not really. I haven't really had any experience with things consistently throughout the year.
Okay. All right. That's
Good
awesome.
suggestion.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Super. Thank you, Ella.
Thanks, Ella.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So back in our busy order here, I think we're gonna, up next is going to be, what do we, oh, Dale
Dale
Street.
Street.
Mike, Mr. Quinlan, come on up.
I'm gonna try not to touch this in case there's
Cooties!
coronavirus or
Cooties!
something.
That time I was like, how far can fleas go? 17 feet, I'd heard.
So I know we've started the conversation about grade configuration for the Dale Street School. I wanted to talk it through with you, I'm really here to answer questions as much as anything, but also talk to you a little bit about the process and how I see this playing out. The school building committee obviously is not the proper place to be setting educational policy, so we're really looking for the school committee and the district office to really be making a recommendation about what their preferred solution will be, because it's the most important decision surrounding this school project, not just how it'll impact the overall delivery of education, but also how it'll impact all the residents' taxes, which it's a very large decision, probably in the order of magnitude of $30 to $35 million in terms of the cost of the building for the larger school versus the smaller school. So
Like, can you go back and clarify that for just a second?
Sure.
It would be $30 to $35 million more
More.
to build
A larger
three
school,
extra
the
grade.
3 through 5 versus the 4 and 5.
Thank you.
And
Is
again,
that
the-
the overall number or the?
that's the overall number before MSBA reimbursement, so the town would end up absorbing probably about a third of that alone, and the rest would be reimbursed by the MSBA. So that just is really just to sort of give you a frame of reference on the size of the impact from a decision standpoint. There's obviously a lot of pros and cons to that. Not, you know, the cons obviously is more expensive, but there's some pros to it as well in terms of the MSBA participation and the ability to have them contribute to a larger facility. So, but that said, from an educational perspective, it's really going to come from the school committee and Dr. Marsden and his staff. So we have, in the building committee meetings, we've started to set structure together for how that decision gets made. We put in, obviously, a couple of meetings with the school committee to have it on your agenda so that you can discuss it and the public would have the opportunity to provide input. But also, given that the size of a project like this, which will be the single most expensive project that this town has done, if it is approved, either enrollment, it's highly important that these projects get as much support as possible, if not, you know, unanimous support from key boards and committees in town, including yours, including the Board of Selectmen, including the Warrant Committee. So in my professional life, I build schools for a living. So when we're working with a town that is facing a decision like this, we often advise them to do a joint meeting of those boards and committees. So that's really something that I'm looking to potentially set up for about the 3rd or 4th week of March, if you are open to that. So what that would look like would be a posted meeting for the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, Warrant Committee, and School Building Committee, together in one space and really what we would look for from the school committee and the superintendent would be to kind of lead that meeting and make a recommendation to the other boards, so that, you know, they know what your preferred solution is, and then they have an opportunity to ask questions in an open environment. We talk about feedback and we can talk about all the impacts of whatever the recommendation is. Everybody hears the same story at the same time. There's no confusion when you're bouncing around from committee to committee. And then ultimately, each committee then sort of goes to their separate corners and further discusses it, but eventually must vote on it to support whatever the recommendation is or to not support it. So that's sort of the structure I'm looking to put together. I wanted to see what your feedback is on that, if you had any thoughts for or against that concept or tweaking it. And then also if you have any questions about, you know, ultimately what this decision is going to mean, what the process is after that decision. But that's kind of the key decision at hand right now, especially for you and for the town, is really, you know, what we're going to need to decide whether we're doing a 2 or a 3 grade school. And we're going to need to be able to document all of that for the MSBA. They're very diligent about making sure that we go through a process and ensure that the community supports the decision. So anyway, so with that, I'd open it up for questions to start. I'm sure you have a bunch, but maybe I'm wrong.
Just have a clarifying on the last one. When you say the groups go to put their own corners, is that then come back to, are you saying all that in that one meeting, or is that?
No, so that would be separately. So ultimately, after that, that's really sort of a meeting to discuss, disseminate information equally to everybody, and ask questions back and forth, and then also provide, you know, have an opportunity for the community to discuss their thoughts on it, gather that feedback. Ultimately, you as a committee will be required by the MSBA to formally vote on the preferred solution, all of which has to be then also fully supported by the ed plan that's being developed, because ultimately they want to ensure that, you know, these are not willy-nilly decisions, and the MSBA would not allow that. They provide sort of a check and balance to ensure that whatever decision we're making as a community is backed up by the proper utilization of the classrooms, and we'll go into great detail. But the ed plan is kind of the key factor in that. That's really what drives the decision to, basically the decision about what size the school is has to be supported by a good ed plan that shows how you're gonna utilize it. So I don't know if that, so, and then ultimately, you would vote on it, the Board of Selectmen eventually would need to formally take a position on it. Ultimately, and it may not be, it's not required by the MSBA, but ultimately, the warrant committee is gonna take a position on this, when we get to a full vote, when we put this in front of the town. So ideally, we have their support, we've developed that support through answering their questions and getting it out in front of it, which is the intent of this meeting.
Beautiful. I think two things. One, you have experience, so I respect that. So, and I think two, I think it's prudent to have this meeting in terms of having all voices at the same time, hearing the same information, and deliberating amongst ourselves and kind of going through the pros and cons. So I think that would be very helpful, and it's helpful to have this conversation earlier rather than later. So I'm for it. So you guys?
Mike, I'm looking at, I think that I have the same schedule
The milestone
that we
schedule,
had. And I'm not sure that the dates have been reworked, but I do have that we have a special school committee meeting on the 27th, which presents the educational plans, and we'll be discussing those. And then, in this.
I should note, just, sorry to interrupt, but that's the first draft.
Right.
Right, it's not a final discussion on it yet.
Right, exactly. And then I have on the 312 meeting that we're supposed to be voting on the submission of grade configurations.
No,
So is that
that's
pushed back, or is
incorrect.
that-
Yeah,
That's
that's not
incorrect, sorry, so that was,
Okay.
we corrected that with the, our OPM made a
Okay.
tweak to that, so
I-
that should not be on
One time I
there.
decide not to print out the next
So
sheet of paper.
The vote,
In color.
That's when I blow it.
Yeah, that vote is for submission of what's called the PDP, or the preliminary design program.
Okay.
And so, ultimately, we need you to vote to submit that to the MSBA.
Right, right.
And in that will be the ed plan, but it also should be noted that, again, it's a draft. It basically goes to the MSBA, they comment back, there's, the ed plan is sort of a living document, and it gets edited along the way in this process.
Yeah, we're doing two ed plans, so we're doing one with a
Correct.
3, 4, 5,
Okay.
one with a 4, 5.
So we're submitting for
two.
that milestone, the PDP milestone, we're submitting two ed plans, two grade configurations, so.
Okay.
But we need to make the decision prior to the next phase, which is called the PSR, or the Preferred Schematic Report. And ultimately, we need to start narrowing it down for the design team, so that we're putting our efforts into a
Right.
preferred scheme,
Okay,
so.
I just wanted to make sure that we
yeah.
had enough time within March to be able to really get that meeting scheduled and that we weren't backing up against it.
So ideally.
I trust you to know. but
Yeah,
me to know.
ideally, what I'm hoping to do is get to probably a May timeframe where we have had a formal vote of the school committee, probably a formal vote of the Board of Selectmen, and then I haven't talked to the warrant committee yet about whether they, issue anything or not, but it's not required for PDP. Matter of fact, the Board of Selectmen isn't even required either. I just think it's prudent from last thing I want to do is to proceed down a route with this project that isn't supported by them, because ultimately, people look to them for leadership, and then if it gets shot down, we have no project.
Right.
And that's not an acceptable
That's not
place for
gonna
me,
work,
so.
Do you have any thoughts or dates around that particular, have you kind of?
I haven't gotten,
Dates this week?
I just started the conversation in the past week, but my target would be probably the 3rd or 4th week of March for that meeting.
And you've got to get the other folks on board, so then
Exactly.
you'll disseminate.
This is.
Dance cards.
Mike Marcucci is on our building committee. I've had preliminary discussions with him, but nothing about scheduling.
Right.
As is Sharon Tatro from the warrant committee, she's our warrant committee member. I've sort of started the conversation with her about this strategy, but nothing has been committed to in terms of dates. So I wanted to see if you guys were amenable to that. Again, I'm happy to arrange all the logistics of it.
So should we take a,
assuming
do
you're
we need
okay
to
with
take a
that.
vote on that, or we just schedule a meeting?
Just schedule a meeting.
All right, great. Anyone else?
Um,
Thumbs up, thumbs up?
I'm very happy to meet and communicate as much as we need to.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. We have to bring everybody along.
Outside of that, while I'm here, do you have any other questions about the building project?
I can't believe how quickly it's going along. I mean,
It's,
every
it's
week
going to
a
move
thousand
very
meetings.
fast, and actually, you know, the faster the better, because time is money in my business.
Right.
So we want to make sure we move this along swiftly.
Yeah. I mean,
You know, that
obviously, it
said,
always
without
costs
rushing
more
it,
to
and make
build
sure we're hitting all the steps that we need to do
later.
with the community to gain their support. So I think this meeting would be an important step in that.
Beautiful, super, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, oh,
I noticed on the agenda, it's just the update of the last meeting. I was gone for the weekend. I know you guys had to cancel the other meeting. So I was just curious what the wrap-up was of the last visioning session.
So the last community forum that we held, so there was a really good visioning session with the educators, and then after that, there was a community forum. I would love it if more people would attend, so if anybody, you know, would want to reach out and try to get some more involvement, we certainly would encourage that. It was lightly attended, but the people that were there were very helpful and gave a lot of good feedback. We talked about building performance, which is, for those unfamiliar, is basically sustainability and energy concerns and how we're going to set goals for this project in terms of minimizing, you know, our energy consumption and things like that. And then we also talked about the feedback from the ed visioning and the ed programming that's gone on. We've got preliminary space templates, which I think are going to start to come together eventually and be presented. We're going to discuss those at the building committee meeting that we had to cancel, unfortunately. So that meeting will get rescheduled for later in the month, and we can start talking about the space templates.
Thanks. I'm just curious.
Okay.
thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Why are you taking
So
down?
just in terms of that, too, I just wanted to get some feedback from you of what type of data would you be looking for in terms of configuration? You know, what types of data would be helpful for you to make that decision as we go forward? You don't have to answer me now, but you can shoot me an email, but I think that on the 27th, the next meeting, we're gonna start talking about this, additionally, some of the grade configuration options that we have and some of the pros and cons. So anything that you can think of that would be helpful to you for this decision, please let me know. We've certainly got a lot of data based on the surveys,
Exchange.
but we have data from teachers as well, so anything else that you think would be helpful, let me know.
I think there'd be some, how you would envision resource allocation as a
Mhm.
result of that, from, your day-to-day operations. I think it'd be good to share what kind of impact that, that kind of campus style would have. Pros and cons of that, like
Mhm.
what kind of, what's the impact on programming for school students, from grades 2 to 5 as a result.
Mhm.
Impact on programs like MAP, perhaps as well. And then the overall benefits and drawbacks to student transitions, the idea of, where the grades sit together, or the buildings, where their buildings reside as well.
Mhm.
Because, considering sites as well, and one of the sites has the buildings sharing a site, one of the
Right.
proposals. So if they're sharing a site together, what does that do for the mindset of our students as they're going through that process as well?
Mhm. That's helpful, thank you. Anything else you can think of that?
The obvious
I would rather
cost
form it
factor
better.
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
front and center,
For sure.
for good or for bad.
And I would think, perhaps maybe Mike and the building committee too can also talk about the pros and cons of building a smaller building versus a larger building, and the future of our current buildings as a result, right? So if our what are our population stays the same or grows? You know, if it grows, obviously we may need more space, right? And,
But what's the tipping point, you know?
Right.
When I hear people argue about, no, it's gonna be 700 people, no, it's gonna be 800 kids, I think, or at 100 kids over 10 years really makes very little difference to me, frankly. And, you know, it's like, so what is the tipping point in terms of how large we built this building? And also, I think Leo's right, you know, we act like we are not going to need another school ever, but quite frankly, Wheelock is 50 years old and will probably need major renovation. And I think
Mike's
that we
argument.
just, and that, if we were to have a larger school, and surprise, in 10 years, we were to have a population dip,
Right.
as sometimes these things happen, does that allow us to use that space to be more creative about how we manage to really have a less disruptive educational plan over time?
Mhm.
You know, that there are things that we need to think about that are much longer than this kind of 20-year period of debt and reimbursement, which is actually quite good for the town. You know, I think we've been living off reimbursement from the MSBA for quite some time now.
Yeah, I can tell you, since I've taken over as chair of the permanent building committee and now chair of the school building committee, we've always tried to take a long-term
Right.
vision here, because this town has spent a lot of years looking at just immediate needs. And
Right.
when you're making such a major investment like this, that can lead to being too short-sighted, and it's led to.
And we're paying for it.
expenses that aren't
Correct.
accounted for.
And I would say it is probably logical to believe that the more we can build now at the prices that we have now, it would probably be more to our advantage than to have to build more 10 or 15 years from now, when the prices will be, by their very nature, more.
It certainly has appeared that way in the
It does
past.
seem to appear that
Past
way.
is no precedent, but definitely construction costs are astronomical. They continue to proceed much higher than inflation. And they're escalating right now, but get varying degrees of feedback of 4 to 5% a year.
Yeah.
So.
So the longer we wait, and the less we think in terms of the future, the more that we're really gonna be
It's-
dinging our
it's-
future.
It's always a double-edged sword. I mean, if money were no object, we'd build as big as we could, but, there's always, like you said, there's a tipping point to, what can we afford? And so I'm gonna be working with the town administrator, the assistant town administrator, going over all the tax implications, so that there's some preliminary analysis of all this, because we do also, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this isn't just a net add to the books. We did 3 school projects almost 20 years ago. All that debt is starting to come off the books. Helps offset some of the pain we're gonna feel from this project. So we wanna make sure that we're communicating all of that. We're looking at the whole picture, not just this project in a silo.
And then it's not just tax implications as well, that we really do need to, as I've been watching over the last several years, be thinking about very much more how we generate revenue as a town and not just on taxes. That we really need to be looking at our full fee structures, I think, on many different levels. So this may be a very good opportunity to kind of technically say to the town, like, okay, so if we need a second job, where does that money come from? I mean, I think that's a really necessary question at this point in our financial life, so. But those are ongoing questions. Thank you, Mike.
So Mike had mentioned the educational plan that we're working on. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like and what the components are. So there's a background of the district and the school and a vision of what we're looking at. Grade and school configuration, class size policies, school scheduling methods, teaching methodology and structure, teacher planning and room assignment policies, lunch program, technology instruction policies and requirements, media center, library, visual arts programs, music performing arts programs, physical education programs, special education programs, sample student schedule, transportation, function and spatial relationships, security and visual access, and the program conclusion. So that's what Steve and I have been working on for the last few weeks, and we've had great help from the department heads. Have really helped us out in their general areas to give us some feedback. Also taking the information from the visioning sessions to put that all together. So that's what you'll have a draft of on the 27th.
Thank you.
Super. Anything else with the project? No? All right.
I just, the week of the 17th, I'm out. It's the once-a-year conference. So just
Okay.
For scheduling it to them now.
Yeah, I was thinking more, I'm thinking more, yeah, sorry, I should have said the fourth week. I'm thinking like the week of the 23rd, potentially.
That works
Also,
better.
given that list from Leo, you might need that extra time to prepare. Sorry, buddy.
Super. All right.
It is really hard around here, man. We don't take it easy on each other.
Follow up with
Yeah.
the selectmen and the warrant committee and let
Funnel
them
the
know that you
options.
guys are
Yeah,
amenable to this.
for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Alrighty, so now another jump. We'll go to the social studies framework presentation.
Hey, Kathleen?
Must be Kathleen.
Thank you, everyone, for being as flexible as you've been.
Okay, I was doing a lesson plan in my head. I'm Kathleen Emerson. I'm the Social Studies Department Chair for grades 6 through 12. And this is my third go-round with changes in the social studies standards. The first time was in '97 and 2003 and now. I am thrilled with this new standards. First of all, let me tell you that I think it's very reflective of where our kids are now and what they're going to be needing in the future. And there certainly was a lack, particularly in the middle school, of any kind of civics instruction or connection to U.S. history. So some of the highlights going forward, I'm going to try and take a 217-page document and squeeze it down into 10 slides in 10 minutes for you.
Thank you.
So the highlights include an emphasis on civics at all levels, beginning with pre-K and all the way up through high school. Sort of the cornerstone piece of this is a new 8th grade course, U.S. and Massachusetts government and civic life. An increased focus on diverse peoples in the U.S. and the world. I just heard a statistic which made me think how important this is. By 2040, white, non-Hispanic Americans will only make up 40% of the population. So the world that we're sending our kids into is very different than the world we grew up in, and certainly very different than what most have experienced in Medfield, and I think this is a really awesome opportunity to expose them to a lot of diversity. There are standards for the practice of history. Christine, would you mind just clicking on that little thing there? I can show you. Which, a lot of people, when they say they don't, oops, you need permission. That's Liz. That's why. Well, I'll tell you what it was. It's all right. It's all right.
Can we go back?
No, because you have to go, yes, because you're going to have to go right through, go back to that slide. There you go. What it was is the best way to teach history, through inquiry, through problem solving, through informed opinion. There's absolutely, the word know, K-N-O-W, is rarely in these standards. Because as I said to my students all the time, I don't think I ask my students to remember 3 dates in the whole year. Facts are important, but they are not as important as they used to be because we have them on our phones. So our job as history teachers is to work with those facts and help kids understand cause and effect and possible solutions and things like that. So the practice of history, if we could get in there, there's 7 standards that teachers are encouraged to teach with. They also include literacy standards. What do we want our kids to do in terms of writing and reading and certainly technology as well. They included 3 new branches. Well, they're not really new, but they're new for us. 3 new branches of standards in the social studies. One is financial literacy, news media literacy, and economics. And that's probably the most challenging for us as teachers because even though economics comes under the social studies, it wasn't a forte for most of us. So just these are the titles really of social studies in each grade, and I won't go through them. You see them there. But in pre-kindergarten, they're going to be looking at things like fairness, responsibility, respect, concepts of time, very simple things. Kindergarten, classroom, citizenship, what does it mean to be a good citizen in the classroom? Chronology, things like first, last, long ago. First grade, we already get into elections, leadership, communities, families, and it's very specifically highlighted the families may look different. Symbols of the United States flag, eagle, things like that. Second grade, geography and its effects on people.
They want kids to study not just what is the capital of, Djibouti, but how does geography affect where people live, migration, both voluntary or forced, which is interesting at such a young age, immigration, which obviously is a hot button issue these days, and countries outside the United States. Third grade goes a little bit, stays traditional with the history of Massachusetts. Particularly large emphasis on Native peoples, not just their encounters with Europeans, but what their lives were like for years here. And then they look at the Pilgrims and pretty much end up with the Constitution. Fourth grade, they go back to geography, physical geography, and look at the explorers, the expansion of the U.S. over time, study different regions of the country, and again, Native peoples throughout the country. Fifth grade is probably the biggest change. Colonization, American Revolution, but I've noticed they don't focus so much on the battles and the people and the things that we probably learned as far as revolution. They focus a little bit more on principles of government and ideas of America. They spend time on slavery, that's huge, but more what were lives like for African Americans going back to the 1600s and then up through the Civil War. Civil War is not taught as most of us learned it, again, with battles and sides. That comes more in high school. And then they kind of jump to the Civil Rights Movement and use that as a springboard, as an example for other civil rights movements, LGBTQ movements, women's movements, things like that. So it's very interesting, and as I said, it's very inclusive. The more I look through it and dig through it, the more I'm impressed by how they put it together. The fourth one there, I have economics, which, as I said, has not been something that we've focused on a lot. And if you can see the examples they have in the first grade, how people make choices about purchasing goals and services and saving resources. Second graders, how people earn a living, exchange goods and services, and save for the future. This is really woven into every year, as well as the civics piece. Some of the takeaways I got after looking through these closely, there's a focus on unity, there's a focus on diversity and respect for differences. Focus on Native Americans way more than I remember learning as a child, and certainly my children who went through the Westwood Public Schools. American Revolution, as I said, founding documents, they're introduced very early to primary sources, the actual words, the actual writing of some of the founding fathers, and again, the responsibilities of citizenship, which is another major theme. So that's pre-K to 5. In the middle school, 6th and 7th grade have switched a little bit. 6th grade was geography and 7th grade was ancient civilizations, and they kind of split it. So if you look at 6th grade, it's a study of complex societies, Mesopotamia, things like that. An emphasis on geography and the environment. Kids are asked to look at some big issues with geography, like deforestation and climate change, but not from a scientific lens, from a geopolitical lens. 7th grade is, again, some more ancient civilizations, some religions, China, Japan, ancient Greece and Rome, and then Europe from 12 to 1800. And I'll show you how we kind of arrived at that. That's a little bit of our tweaking of the state's plan, which I'll explain in a minute. And then the big course, which is brand new that we're very excited about, is United States and Massachusetts Government and Civic Life. There's 7 different topics, and I just highlighted a couple of them for you. One is the rights and responsibilities of citizens. What is the role of an individual in maintaining a healthy democracy? The goal is to get kids to understand not just government, but want to take an active participatory role. The Constitution amendments in the Supreme Court, how has the context and interpretation of the Constitution evolved over time? And they'll look at some of the amendments where women got the right to vote, perhaps the newest amendment with the decision today that ERA might be reintroduced. How has the Supreme Court decided some things? And they have particular courses that, particular decisions, including, the most recent gay marriage decision, Citizens United, at an 8th grade level, which I think is pretty amazing. The one that's very interesting, which again I didn't expect, but I'm thrilled we have it, freedom of the press and news and media literacy. How does a free press support a democratic government? And we know that's very much in the news these days. Our 8th grade team is going to a conference on February 28th at Tech with a master teacher to learn how to delve into this subject. And then the capstone of this is called the Civic Action Project, and this was part of DESI's plan all along, and then an additional boost was Governor Baker signed a law in 2018 requiring all 8th graders to take part in a student-led, nonpartisan project to learn the process of making change. They're just starting that. An email went home today. I think, Christine, did you get as a parent of an 8th grader? Explaining it to parents. It's not going to be campaigning for Bernie. It's not going to be, we want
Anna
more.
Mae and Jess.
We want, we want more cookies in the cafeteria, things like that. So we expect a lot of student interest in environmental issues, and our job as teachers will be help them to narrow that focus and figure out who are the change makers. We don't expect them to necessarily get results. We expect them to learn about the process. Okay, so grades 9 through 12. I still haven't quite understood.
Sorry, before
Yep.
you go on to the high school, so back to the capstone project, are you guys going to have a huge exhibit, you know, invite families, community?
We're
I
not
mean,
quite sure yet. We want to
okay.
see what form these take. They will be required to present,
Right.
for sure, whether or not it's families, another class, the whole school, because we're talking about, 200 presentations. Do we want to do like the old-fashioned science fair kind of a thing? And we'll get more information on that too through Tech to see what the other school districts are planning. But I think the teachers are excited about it. There's definitely, was it 63-page guideline for 217 for the standards and 63 for the project. So it's pretty involved. Okay, 9 through 12. Now this is the interesting part, and I know I'm not a mathematician, but they gave us 4 courses for high school, but only 3 years are required, and one of them must be U.S. history. So World History 1 used to be taught in 8th grade, but now, of course, we have civics. So what do we do with World History 1, World History 2, US 1, and US 2? We didn't want to put all 4 courses mandatory in the high school because, first of all, I don't think we'd be allowed to do that, Mr. Parker. And then, secondly, over 75% of our students take electives. And we didn't want to reduce their ability to take electives by having to take 4 courses. So what we did was take the World History 1 course and divide it between the 6th grade, 7th grade, and 9th grade. So this year's 9th graders are taking sort of a hybrid course of world history, and then US 1 as sophomores, US 2 as juniors. So that's what it looks like over there, world history, US 1, US 2. The new standards for economics, financial literacy, and news and media literacy say that schools must offer them. It doesn't say that it's a requirement, but schools must offer these as courses. We already offer an AP economics class. The personal financial literacy course, I think we're going to offer through our business department, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the news and media literacy we're offering next year. These are the current electives that we're in the works for next year. All the blue ones are year-long courses, so you can see how our AP course selection is pretty robust, and we have a lot of students that take these classes, so we didn't want to make another mandatory course and inhibit them from taking these. The ones in green are semester courses. The new one is up there on the right, the top, Human Studies. This was proposed by a young teacher, Michael Kohler, who's also an alum. We had a behavioral studies class, was kind of an intro to psychology. We also had general psychology, we had AP psychology. So we have felt for a long time we're a little top heavy on the psychology. He said, what if I take the intro to psychology and add like an anthropology and a philosophy component to it, which just looks really, really interesting. And then word is already out, and a lot of kids seem to be interested in signing up for that. Sociology is a hybrid course, meaning it's done partially in school and partially at home, which always attracts a lot of kids because they can come in late on those days. And then those ones in red is something new we're trying. We're trying quarter courses. We did a survey of our students beginning of last year with maybe 25 to 30 things that my department brainstormed. What would we want to teach? What do we think kids want to teach? What would be like a one-shot quick thing? And the top 3 that came up were America in Space, Roots of Terrorism, and the History of American Sports. So The 21st Century Citizenship, we have offered already, and it'll probably be in its last year because we won't need it anymore once the kids go through the civics program in 8th grade. And then the financial literacy and news and media literacy will be new as well. So kids will sign up for these in pairs, and I think our teachers are very excited about them because it gives them a chance to see something that's outside of their wheelhouse, and you know, it's for 1 quarter. So we'll see in about a month how it goes with the registration. Any questions?
I have a question about, so I think, what did you call them at the first slide? The highlights.
Mhm.
You know, really how do we expose the kids to more diversity, especially in a town like Medfield. So are you folks going to promote more field trips? Because I suppose as a parent who's gone through the system, I haven't seen a lot of field trips. So I'm wondering if that's part of it, you know, the Black History Trail, you know, there's so many opportunities in Boston that we can kind of tap into.
That's one of the first things we thought of with this. It's also in our day-to-day teaching. For example, I teach US 2, and which is juniors, and the 20s is a big unit. And this year when I was looking through the new standards, I'm like, I gotta really up my game, because I always mentioned the Harlem Renaissance, but now it's given quite a lot of weight. There are actually new standards in there in the 20s for LGBTQ relationships in the 20s, and the increase of same-sex relationships and things that I wouldn't necessarily expect to see in there before. So in our day-to-day teaching, we're approaching diversity that way as well. Certainly through the civics piece, the whole idea of extending rights to different groups is really weighted quite heavily. But certainly and we've talked about field trips. Unfortunately, one of our favorite, which doesn't necessarily have to do with diversity, but if any of you had been to the Natick World War II Museum, which just closed, and it was the most amazing little gem. You went hidden in an office space across from the Natick Mall, and students.
No idea.
Yeah, it wasn't very well publicized, and I used to go every year with my students, and it was just phenomenal. They could only take like 30 kids at a time, and then they got into an argument with the new owner, and the whole thing shut down. But certainly, one of the pieces that I like now of having the civics and early U.S. history back in the middle school is that the Washington trip will make more sense. The Lexington and Concord and early U.S., we have the resources right here. Because that was the piece, in my opinion, that had been missing in the 2003 frameworks, was that the middle school courses contain nothing of civics or U.S. history. So, and I feel like 8th grade is a good place for a jumping off point for that.
Okay, so diversity, I suppose, has many meanings, and I would just hope that we would take advantage of some of the resources that we have so close.
Absolutely.
To home.
Diversity is also about weaving into economics, because diversity does not necessarily mean what we kind of socially construct as race.
Well, that's why I said there are many meanings.
So many meanings.
Yeah.
And that as we're thinking very collaboratively around
And
what truly diversity is.
Exactly, and economic diversity is a conversation that comes up quite often. As I said, speaking in my own class, we talked about the Gilded Age and the gap between the rich and the poor, and then I told the students that the gap today is greater than it was during the Gilded Age, and that makes kids really woo, you know. So that's the kind of thing. Again, exposing our kids in as many ways as possible that the world is the country is much different than Pound Street or South Street are.
Yeah.
And the invisibility, I think, sometimes of the diversity that's around us.
Right. And we are, as you know, becoming an increasingly diverse community, and I don't think kids recognize, and I know I've tried hard with my own staff to be careful of the things that we say, that we can't assume that everybody has X, Y, and Z.
12.9% of our district is now people who would not necessarily consider themselves Western European Caucasian.
And it's growing, and as I said, it's growing in the country too, so. Christine? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm really pleased to announce we're just about to launch a course. It's the equivalent of graduate credit in terms of rigor 13.
Christine, would you mind going to just so that everyone can hear it, because they won't hear you if you're.
It'll go on Medfield TV and you'll be a star. Just like us.
So I'm really pleased to announce we have a really robust professional development opportunity for our teachers. So far, we have 20 teachers signed up, 10 elementary, 10 secondary, primarily from social studies. Really focusing on social studies, but taking it a lens larger, focusing on cultural awareness and curriculum development. So this is something that through a series of 13 weeks, our teachers, Medfield teachers, will be learning about race, class, gender, all these different pieces and how they intersect with curriculum development. And at the end, the capstone is that the teacher will be producing the equivalent of a unit plan or multiple lesson plans or some other thing that's very salient to their work. But it's all focused around the central through line of that is cultural awareness and realizing the multiple forms of diversity. But I'm really happy we have a number of social studies teachers who have signed up on the secondary level and on the elementary level as well, especially with these framework changes, that they need a bunch of different curricula and really developing that. So we're supporting them throughout that process.
Fantastic.
It's a really great thing to hear.
Medfield University.
Yeah, and Medfield College.
Medfield College.
Medfield College. Really
As long as it's not a not-profit and they pay tax rate, I'm good with it.
Super.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it's free to teachers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, I
Great job.
appreciate it. I have to say on a personal note, my son is loving his civics class in
That's
8th grade,
awesome.
although I'm probably not allowed to say that on camera. But he very much likes it.
That's wonderful, yeah. I mean, there's no other time, especially with what's going on in the world, and now the kids are so interested, but they also need so much guidance.
Right.
And it's perfect, and the news immediacy literacy, I mean, oh my gosh, the fake news that we get or that we're accused of, and now I'm questioning everything.
Right.
How do I, and so that's, you know, our job is to help them pick through those weeds.
In crisis opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think what's equally exciting to hear it from the kids is the teachers. I saw Greg Cohan the other day, and he's like,
Ian
I
has
love that, you know, and
Mr.
I was
Cohan, too.
like to
He
feel
says
his
he's done a
excitement
great job making
for it.
it
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's awesome.
Really interesting, which is no small task.
Real good job, very, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I mention something real quick about the quarter class?
Yeah.
So it's something we've talked about offering here in different departments, and our current schedule is very complicated, so you start mixing in full year classes with semester classes and quarter classes, it becomes even more challenging. So when we presented the concept to the department chairs, they all sort of liked it. So we decided that it would just be social studies for now, for next year, just to pilot to see what it would be like to get quarter classes into our schedule. So they surveyed the students to try to gather some ideas of the types of courses that students would like. So I want to really thank Kathleen and her department for sort of putting that together. I'd like to think that going forward, students will see more quarter classes, but we just kind of wanted to get in the water, feel, sort of how it worked within our schedule for a year. And then I think it may be something that we'll continue to offer.
That's cool. So the kids could actually take 4 quarters or 2 quarters and a half a semester. Is that how the?
Yeah, and
Do you have to lump two together in order to make
so
it work?
you
So
kind of
really
have to
get
do
your
it in
own-
pairs, or we're looking at, right now, students can take a study.
Okay, good.
Full year study, a half a semester study. So, and again, it's a very complicated schedule. If 2 of the quarter classes don't just match or aren't of interest and they want to do a quarter study and a quarter class, we're just trying to create as many combinations as possible. And
Awesome.
every time I mention this, I Heather. Probably another day for
Or
something.
hair head explodes, yeah.
Yeah, just trying to give them more options, and we'll see how it plays this year, but I think that it may be something that we'll see more of.
How are the numbers looking? Have you done course selection yet?
Not yet, the end of this month, beginning of March, we start getting.
Yeah, I think parents get their program studies tomorrow.
So all this, that's what I was gonna ask, and all this has made it in? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
and then,
It's amazing.
We got it.
Oh, you
We
did
got
get
it
it right.
last
I know
week.
Stephanie was thinking the end of this week, so she
Last
had it
week, yeah.
last week. We have our incoming 8th grade night at the end of February, and then
It happens to be on the same night as the Dale Street thing, so anything you could do to catch me up would be great.
I think you just did. There it is.
But yeah, by late March, we have pretty much the numbers that the get us going with.
was just curious how, if that's appealing to the students. I mean, I think it would be, the idea of.
And of those 6, American Space, Roots of Terrorism, and History of Sports were the top vote getters from kids of the survey that we did.
Yeah.
The bottom 2 are required to be offered by the state, but we hear, and Barbara and I talked about this, we think every parent would love their kids to take financial literacy because it includes things like compounding interest and credit card debt and the cost of college loans and how to write a check. You know, debit
Nobody
card.
writes checks.
Yeah, exactly.
You use your app.
Exactly. When I see those people in the supermarket, but those kinds of things that when we send kids off to college that they literally don't have that understanding. There's also I forgot to mention, there's a whole unit in US 2 that's big picture economics and how decisions that the president and Congress makes, how that ripples effect and budgetary implications and I mean, it's quite heady. We've been doing we did some PD last summer and we'll be doing some more, I hope. But the news and media literacy, that's going to be really interesting too, how we structure that. But our teachers are very excited about it. It's something that's different and it's, you know, if they hate it, it's only for a term. Which is always appealing too. Or I can't stand that kid, well, he's gone.
That never happened.
Never happened. Never happened.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for hanging out to the bitter end. Well, not quite bitter end.
All right, shall we jump to the top now and go to the... ¿Qué pasó?
Yeah.
We're good, yeah.
Sure, you want to do it in minutes?
Please.
I'm so excited. Megan's been giving me a hard time here. Seeking a motion to approve the minutes for the executive session on 1/30/20 and the school committee meeting on 1/30/20.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
All right,
Sorry,
so
I'm
overnight field trip requests?
Yes. So in your materials, you had 3 requests.
Overnight field trip requests. We're
Uh,
starting from the top now.
Right.
Okay.
You had 3 requests. One was for the All-State Music Festival from the Music Department. Another was from the State DECA competition. Now, the DECA Club is a new club. It's a business-oriented club at the high school this year, which is really going very, very well. And then the Annual Association of Student Councils Convention, which you approve almost every year. So I would ask that you approve them as they appear in your packet.
Do you have a motion?
I make a motion to approve these donations as they appear in.
Not donations.
These are
Overnight
these
trips.
Overnight trips.
I have one quick thing, and I'm not looking specifically at them right now, but I know that in the past, and I think we have approved overnight field trip requests, and sometimes these things have to be, the fundraising has to start so early in order to kind of get them to happen, and yet I always kind of feel like I'm catching up when I approve something that we've already fundraised for. I don't think that's the case with this one, is it?
No.
I didn't think so, but I wanted to make sure that as we kind of go forward, that this is, it's something that's, if we're approving it, we should be approving it before anybody has devoted
deposits
some
down
serious
and-
income to it,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So, but otherwise, moving on.
I just had one question. I think it's when you say Jennifer Schaefer will chaperone the trip, do you have?
Jessica.
Jess Schaefer? Yeah.
Jess Schaefer,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have, are those typically, do you have one or do you have more than one?
Usually have more than one. Yeah, Jess is gonna be there. I'm not sure if anyone else is going with Jess.
Do you know?
I don't think anyone is on this one, but.
For
It depends on the
MASC,
numbers of students, how
Yeah.
many go.
Do you know how many going to that, Campbell?
it varies year to year. It just depends on how many they can get and how many, because it's just done by how many rooms they can fill, and so they have enough to fill each room because you need like 4 to a room.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly how many are going this year, but I do know there's
Oh, 16.
16. Yeah.
Yeah, so one person.
What do you mean?
16
Is
students.
that kind of how our standards work?
Yeah,
Like
so
you-
16 kids and we'll have one.
But international trips are totally different.
They're totally different, yeah.
And it's
We would
also,
have a lower ratio.
Right.
I haven't personally been, it's also a much more controlled environment. A lot of other teachers from other schools. It's a very,
I know that several of those kids are also over 18.
yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Today?
Days ago, right?
Tuesday, yeah.
Oh, yes, I saw
Happy
that.
birthday.
I didn't mean to exaggerate, I just
No, no,
it
yeah.
caught my
That's a
eyes
good
just I was
question.
wondering what
Yeah.
our standards are.
Yeah. but yeah, international trips totally different. Okay, great. Oh,
Aye.
do we have a motion to approve? Oh, Megan, sorry, a second?
I second.
Do you want me to restate it since I did it wrong?
Sure.
Make a motion to approve the requests for overnight trips.
Second.
I second.
As stated in the packet.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, that was
Beautiful.
ugly.
Thank you.
That wasn't a good.
We all make an ugly move occasionally, it's
growth
all right.
mindset.
So-
I'll never cast a stone. All right, kindergarten
Throw that
space
rock.
discussion.
So in your materials, Leo had asked this to be on the agenda. In your materials, it had the breakdown of what we have for sign-up so far for kindergarten. So we have projections of 223 students for next year kindergarten. Right now, we only have 172 registered. And I put at the bottom of that, it should be noted that 13 families have already told us they're going to register or retain their kids in kindergarten and hold them up for 1 year.
And that
Oh,
includes
that
the
are-
172,
They're in
right?
kindergarten and they're.
No, they're
not
preschool,
going-
they're not going to
Okay,
kindergarten next year,
that was my question.
they'll go the following year. So that,
Summer birthday boys.
that is not
Probably
included in the 172.
born in, like,
Right, because they're not enrolled.
Right.
I was just kidding, when I saw that
It's
earlier,
getting that.
is that normal percentage, or is it something that's?
We've had as high as 20. That particular year, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Out of the 20 was
Right, that's where
18
that
boys.
huge bubble came.
It was a
where
big bubble.
All of a sudden, our grade size just got that much larger.
Jeff, the projected of 223, that's off of the NASDAQ projections, correct?
And also MSBA.
So,
Both.
But our current census is predicting, how many are we expecting out of the, do we?
So Missy and I talked about this today. There's 40 kids out there that is projected based on NASDAQ and MSBA that are not part of the census.
But that, I mean,
That's move-ins, right? I
that's
mean,
an easy, like, spring season.
we typically get
Maybe.
20 move-in.
So if we did the typical 20, it would be at 192, is it right?
Which is similar to what we have now.
Yeah. How does that work in the space we got?
Well, we're gonna have to see where we are probably in late April, early May, because that's, part of the budget is an additional kindergarten
We have
teacher
to-
as well. So if
We
we're not
also
gonna
have
get
to
that,
plan.
if we're not gonna get that 223, we gotta take a look at that as well and see whether or not we need that. But we're just gonna,
So does that help, does it help us in the space situation? We wouldn't have to take a specialist room or something?
Correct.
Yeah. Because it will just take the place as it is now.
it is now.
Jeff, how many did we get the year that it blew up 2 years ago, that summer? I mean, we had got 100 kids.
So that
into
was
the
a lot
district.
in first grade.
Yeah.
So I think Memorial as a whole, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was around 60 kids that Memorial got.
Right.
So that was a big jump.
I mean, sometimes it's just so, you just can't tell in April or May. The season really hasn't even started on. But
Yeah, I was gonna say.
we do what we
worst-
can do with the information we
Well,
have.
the good thing
worst
is,
Scenario, if like, we, at the end of the school year, have this many signed up, and we budget for it, and that's what we have, and then 60 kids move in
Yeah.
over the summer, what then?
well, the good thing is that
Throw
we've
it.
centralized registration, so we did that 2 years ago now. So all the registration goes through one person, and we have that on the website. People contact Beth, and she does all that registration. So even if, like, we got a call today of someone that's looking to buy a home in town, they gave us the information on their kids. So people are pretty proactive with that, and they have been. It's just that if it's, beyond, June 19th, it becomes problematic, but
Well, I'm saying this because I, 7 years ago, did just that.
Yeah.
And I didn't let you all know till August 21st.
Right.
Well, I tried.
Right.
But everybody's on vacation.
Right.
I'm back August 21st.
That's different now.
I'm
So
sorry.
you got one more person in your kindergarten class.
Mhm.
I also
Yeah.
think we
It
do
was a
more
small
work
it was a small
with
year that we
outreach
got, but-
to the real estate agents in town to really say, as soon as you have PNS, please let
Yeah,
us
Missy's been
know.
doing a really good job with that,
Yeah.
just trying to get as many numbers as we can.
Yeah.
But this is very similar to where we were last year,
Yeah.
in terms of numbers.
And we
So-
added 20.
Right. Yeah.
Now, do you ask families to declare whether or not they're holding their kid back?
They notify us. Yeah.
Oh, they do?
And so
Okay.
those are notifications.
So those
And they're
13
not
are
included.
kids that were on our census that we've reached out to that they've told us were
Okay,
holding
so
them.
the current class size
We have to track them
doesn't reflect that.
by state law anyway, we have
Right.
to track them.
Yeah.
So indeed, actually, you know, if we didn't have those 10 or 13 kids being held, and we got a predicted 20, we would be much closer to.
Much
that
closer to
just being
223.
numbers.
Yeah, much closer.
So, but it just kind of pushes them back for the next year.
Mhm.
Right.
It does make things a little harder, but.
So we can keep this on the agenda until the end of the
Yep.
school year, just so I'll
Oh,
give
I
you
think
updates and.
Or
I think
any other
just with the
class
space
size that
issue.
seems
Yeah.
to be bubbling. I mean, I think, you know, we've seen it throughout all of the grades, you know, there's a
Yeah, current
much-
fourth grade's getting up there a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, that's one that Steve and I had a conversation about today, because, you know, you're looking at 23, 24 in some of those classrooms, so that's what we're looking at. In those tiny rooms at Dale Street, so.
Yeah.
You
That's,
don't
that's
have any more
important.
rooms to utilize, right, either. So if we had another teacher, we have no place to put them.
Right.
Cafeteria.
Yeah, the cafeteria, that's right.
Art
It's a nice
class.
space.
Which we don't really wanna do that. I mean, one of the best things about looking at the schematics and starting to plan for a new school is actually having dedicated space for specialists in world language and ensemble practice, like all these
Or-
things that we talk about,
Right.
we
Or
don't
a
have.
true PT room with actual
Instrument
equipment that is
storage.
meant to be there, a true OT area, true special ed kind of resource rooms, things like that.
Right.
We just, you know, we kind of make it work, because that's the way it was then, but need dedicated spaces.
It's amazing that place was a high school. Every time I walk through it, I can't believe it was a high school at one point.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's,
Right.
Crazy.
anyway.
All
So we'll
righty.
keep that on there. And we'll
Okay,
keep-
great.
keep
Um,
on that.
Other items since posting on the 4th of Feb?
We don't have any.
Okay, wonderful. Donations?
Donations, let me get to the donations. So we have a few today. First one is Wheelock School PTO has donated the following funds to the Wheelock School. $1,325 to Bay Colony Educators for the Wheelock Student Assembly. $995 to Mobile Ed Productions for the Earth Dome. Memorial School PTO has donated the following: $4,380 for bus transportation, $707 for 3 Ladybug Dock cameras. And again, we talked about that owning your own bus piece about, you know, that $4,000 isn't there when you own your own bus, right? Those are those costs that field trips cost parents a lot of money because PTO doesn't always cover the transportation. So that's part of our transportation conversations we've had. Blake Middle School PTO, $210 for world language display shelves, $200 for advisory team building games, $1,260 for National Science Teachers Conference. And the following funds to be deposited in the Blake School Gift Account: $219.40 from Box Tops, and $2,838.92 from the commission from the photography company of Gurin and Barrett. I ask that you approve those donations.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
He is so smooth.
Shut
Call it not fair.
FY21 budget update?
So in terms of our FY21, I know that Megan and Jess were at the warrant committee meeting on Monday. Because Michael's been out, we haven't done a lot around that, but I know that you guys wanted to update us on that.
Yeah, I think this is another one of those years where we're in such a transition around trying to figure out what I think everybody at this point is saying, a real structural problem with the town's ability to raise money based on how our population is structured. And that is not a school issue or, you know, like something that, it's just how the town raised money. So, a lot of the things that they are trying to do right now and that they're looking at is several different scenarios around how we manage our kind of continuing capital costs. And there are a couple of different scenarios that they're looking at. One of them being, you know, like, can we do a scenario in which we kind of correct the kind of consistent underfunding of capital expenses, like fire trucks, like police cars that have holes in the bottom of them, and things that generally put our staff, and our kids and everybody else in danger. It's not, you know, a lot of these things are not okay. But they're always the first thing to go. So they're looking at a way of, essentially what they do with the municipal building fund. They're looking at whether they can also do that with a capital stabilization fund. And also different ways of whether they can provide debt service. So, you know, maybe the town would go out and borrow money for fire trucks, which are not inexpensive items, but then be able to service the debt through the capital stabilization fund. And they were still looking into whether that would actually work. But unfortunately, one of the other things they have to do is then also look at what would happen if nobody did an override anywhere, and we had to meet our selectmen's policies on free cash and stockpiling free cash in order to make our bond ratings and to kind of keep our bond ratings and just have generally good fiscal policy. And what would that look like for the town? What would that look like for our capital expenses? What would that look like? And so at the warrant committee meeting on Monday, they were definitely kind of throwing a lot of scenarios around, and I think that they looked through the school budget as well as many of the other town budgets, and thought that they had come up with a possible scenario to be able to do a zero increase, you know, kind of just staying within the Prop 2.5 budget. But Megan and I, and then as I workshopped it with Jeff and Michael, have real concerns about their assumptions. Some of them were just kind of not, kind of a misunderstanding of how school finance works. And I think I look forward to answering their questions around that. Some of them we had answered already, but I think that it just didn't get kind of transmitted. And I think everybody would love to find an instant solution to a lot of these things, but unfortunately there just isn't. There are long-term solutions. I don't know exactly what they are. I think that has a lot to do, again, as I've said, about raising revenue in different ways than simply tax dollars, and that we really have to think about that as a strategic plan for the town. But these are ongoing discussions, but none of them are easy nuts to crack. I think it's fairly evident that the town will feel as though it needs to do an override in one way or another to fund the capital stabilization fund, or to fund certain amounts of debt that they need to package together that were coming anyway. You know, when we voted as a town to do the affordable housing trust, we never actually borrowed that money at the time. We simply approved it, and now the time has come in which they would like to borrow that, and it needs to be packaged in with a couple other things like water tower painting, and they can find better interest rates if they package it together, but it will require some borrowing on the town's part, which will also require the town to vote on it. So it won't simply be a yay or nay, I think, this year. I think there's going to be some overrides. But as to how the warrant committee will choose to structure those, I'm not quite sure yet, and I know that they're not either. They're really struggling about how to really figure this out. We have kind of stuck to our 4%, you know, in the best way that we possibly can. We continue to hold to that. Obviously, you know, that will be discussion amongst all of us about what we can do to kind of mitigate those issues.
Which is in line with the Board of Selectmen policy.
Which is exactly in line with the Board of Selectmen policy, and is essentially what it takes to run a school. But, you know, ongoing discussions.
And I think it's the number of the town administrator provides to get to, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
Right.
what did you say, Megan?
4% was what
It was
we
the
were
number that we were
advised
given
to be
From the
at.
town.
by
Correct.
Christine as well
Yes.
as with
Yeah.
I agree, although the intention was good. everybody wants to get to zero and balance the budget. I
Yeah.
just, there needs to be a sit-down where basic answers are given that can explain the reason why those numbers are there.
Right, and I think we had that conversation.
Again.
But I think that it's, sometimes it's a little like telephone tag. Like,
Right.
you tell one person and and it doesn't quite come together. So,
But before
onward
it gets any further.
and upward.
Already is.
We wanted to make sure, I was uneasy with the conversation, and I've expressed that to Michael as well as the rest of the warrant committee, that I was uneasy with that conversation.
Mhm.
I felt as though it was, it needed more thought before it was had, but, moving on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well,
And we're on the schedule for the 16th of March.
And we will
7:15.
gladly answer any and all questions we possibly can on the 16th of the month.
all right, any informational items?
So I just had that one item that I put in your materials, the space current status. So I think it's important sometimes to celebrate some of the work that's being done with Challenge Success. And we had our meeting with our consultant, Challenge Success, and the whole team this week. And this is one of the documents that was discussed, really taking that space framework, which is student schedule, use of time, P for project and problem-based learning, A for alternative and authentic assessments, and you see all the different areas that are in there. Climate of care for C, and education of the whole community. I'm not gonna go through all those bullet points, but I just wanted to put that in front of you so you get a sense of some of the changes and improvements that have happened in the last couple of years with the work at the high school and really trying to make things better for our students. And we can certainly spend a whole meeting picking all these apart and going through them, but I just wanted to get that on your radar, so maybe in a future meeting, we have this as an agenda item and we talk about it. Going through some of the changes and have some of the staff come in but I think that was it's nice working with a consultant from Challenge Success, but she is the outside eyes coming in and really gave us some good feedback on this, so.
Yeah, the one question, and we can maybe broach it when Robert is here, because Ella was talking about, and maybe Campbell, you can shed some light, how they had midterms, and then I thought, or mid-year exams, and I thought, well, I thought we eliminated all of them, or do we still have them?
I think there's
Some in
very
math and a couple of world
few.
language.
Okay.
I think there was going to be language. I don't think there ended up being any, for my grade at least. There was no language midterm. And then I think honors math, I'm not sure if it was for every grade, but for seniors and juniors, I know it was only honors math that had
Okay.
midterms. So I didn't have anything
Right.
personally.
Just
But I know some
curious.
left.
There aren't many
All right.
left, so.
It's a lot less than it used to be, for sure.
Okay, cool.
So.
All right.
So maybe we can put this on the agenda and
Yeah,
go through it
please.
at some point. but
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to get it.
Who would
from
walk
you.
through it?
I'm sorry?
Who would walk through it? Like, just what type of people?
I
Oh.
would say we'd have the high school folks that, are working on this to go through this.
Because I think that the high school PTO has requested that Challenge Success do kind of like, all right, where have you guys been? Where are you? Where are you going? And that would be nice to also
Be perfect
have
to have
here
it.
at this level,
Sure.
maybe a condensed version.
Yep.
Because I think there are so many pieces to it, and it would be, I think we're in it long enough that we can finally have a bit of a check-in.
No doubt,
Okay,
no doubt.
so maybe they can go through it.
Yep. We'll put that as a future agenda item.
Please.
Yep.
That'd be great. All righty, we're near the end. Yes, no, we're there. Actually, future agenda items, we've got the FY '21 budget, continuation, Dale Street project, kindergarten space, also this Challenge Success, future agenda item. Our next meeting is on the 27th at Dale Street, not here.
Right.
So we're taking our show on the road, which I think is great. And Campbell, would you like to share any bits of information?
Of course. So throughout the past week, we've had our wedding heart sales, which go to Dana Farber. So it's been really successful. Our first year, this is our first year using a website, so we've had people do donations on there.
I saw that. Yeah,
And
that
so
was
if you
good.
did donations on the website, the student could then come in and we could pull up the record of the donation and they could purchase the hearts that way, which proved to be really effective because, as I'm sure many of you know, having kids in the school system, they often forget to either bring money or just kind of forget about it altogether. So it proved very effective, and it was a really successful year on that. And then I know I mentioned this last meeting, but I should mention it again because I think it's a really important fundraiser we do, Potting for Patients. And it's just on March 22nd from 12 to 3 in the afternoon. And it really is a great fundraiser we do every year. It's always really successful, always a lot of fun. It's for the Jimmy Fund. So if you know anybody that has younger kids or really anybody, I think it's got something for everybody, especially the younger kids, but even high school age kids are just
have fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Or, certain school committee members.
Exactly. Really anybody, I enjoy it. It's a great event.
Super.
We did it last year, we had a good time.
Yeah, no, it's cute.
When is that, Cam? It's noon to 4? What is it? What time is it on the 22nd?
It's from 12 to 3 in the afternoon.
Okay.
That's what I have. I can double check
That's
that.
It'll be advertised. Leo?
No major announcements. I thought it was a lovely meeting. It was nice to see the social studies.
I agree.
Stuff, and I love the idea of the quarter classes.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool way to focus on a subject area, and so hopefully it's well received. I think it's great, and for teachers too, because I'm sure those teachers have passions about some of that too,
Yeah.
and to be able to teach a course and unpack some of that, it'd be real fun.
Definitely.
It'd be actually real fun.
I wish I was here for that.
Yeah, no, right. So, major.
I can tell you how they can get more kids into the financial literacy and news and media literacy is that you make that the other half of the block for all the other fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is actually fun too.
I
Just
try
saying,
kind of deceive
but
them
my
to
kids
it.
hate you too.
And have good luck on vacation week next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. My son called it a 9-day weekend.
I'll take that
Love it.
anytime.
Nice. Ditto. Happy vacation. I will be here. I wanted to publicly say congratulations to our own Dr. Marston for his award. I had to write it down, the School Library Association Administrative Advocate Award.
Thank you.
Very impressive for contributions to the promotion of effective school library programs and services, so.
Absolutely.
Great work.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And I think I covered everything else that I need to say in the meeting, so on to you.
I wasn't trying to.
I'm.
Do you have anything feisty you'd like to say
No,
now?
you've been the
Tim?
one that's been
I was just
fine.
trying to get our ratings. We've been trying to improve our
Are
ratings.
you trying to up the ratings?
They like drama. People like drama.
No,
No
I,
drama.
We might
Drama.
get two people to watch.
Double the ratings.
I was told by my wife that our meetings are not as exciting as Sharon's school committee meetings. She goes, "You guys need to spice it up a little bit."
No, we don't.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
And can't it what, show tunes?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, right?
speaking of spicing it up, this social studies, that was a highlight. I want to go back to school and be part of that curriculum. That is
Yeah.
amazing. So it was great, and congratulations as well.
Thanks.
I'm gonna tell you, I got nothing. First time ever.
What?
I got nothing.
Just
Yeah.
right?
Not by
I
that.
gotta-
Write
gotta
that
No
down.
school
start at
visits?
7
No.
o'clock.
Write that down.
No, we'll hear it. You're gonna go to anime and then now we're.
I could admit that I slept through the Judith Evans, Owens thing on Tuesday.
Because
There you go.
Sleep.
I just couldn't make it happen.
That was actually good, really good.
That was fabulous. I was so tired.
Yeah, no, that was good. There was a decent crowd. I wish more people had gone to it, but it was
It was excellent.
really good
What
information.
was the crowd roughly?
Less than 30.
Oh, no, I counted 31.
32?
32. 32.
After I counted. Yes, so, but really great information and made sense, so. And I think, I'm not sure if I think I saw students there who
We
were
had
probably,
students,
yes,
yep.
there were some students there, so I think that's great. And I know that's part of the SEL task force, looking at, sleep needs and also delayed starts, so it's all connected. So interesting stuff, and I second congrats to your award, and
also, you know, when you write an award for the MFI or, you know, for Volunteer of the Year, it's a lot of work, so I'm grateful to Carrie Cowell. Carrie Cowell, who wrote the recommendation, because it's work. So that means a lot, that she did that work for you, so well done.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm also really psyched that the students came here today, not only, and every time you come, Campbell, not just with the updates, but some insights into their world. Like, I think it was awesome that Elizabeth Panciaco suggested the science lab. I thought, genius!
That's a great idea.
Genius!
They're asking for help.
Yes.
That, you
No,
know,
exactly.
There's a culture now that they recognize this is a really hard class, and we would appreciate a formalized area we
Yep.
can go ask for
For
help.
sure,
So
because
that
I think
is
I
very
remember
mature.
towards a while ago, a stigma for asking help, especially early on. And then by the time they're senior, you know, they're fine with it, you know, give me help. But, so I thought that was wonderful, and I'm very psyched, and I was glad Robert was here to hear it, and of course, you and everyone else. And then also Ella's suggestion about student feedback. I do think that is really critical, not just at the end of the year, but I think a couple of teachers maybe do like a month or two, a quarter of the way
It's like what we
in.
do with students. We have formative assessments all the way through, right?
Yeah.
We get that feedback as we go along. We don't wait till the end.
Yeah, and it's not to call anyone out, it's just to say, all right, is what I'm doing effective, and how can I do it a little differently? Because everyone learns a little differently, so I think we need to honor different styles, or just at least acknowledge, all right, what's working, what's not working, maybe I need to tap into a mentor or something or other. So I'm really hoping those two golden nuggets are taken seriously and to heart, because I'm very grateful for that insight. And that's it.
Actually, I did want to thank Campbell. No, I just wanted to say, on that. I wanted to thank Campbell that you did speak up about the weighted versus unweighted grades. Because that is literally something I would not have thought of at this point.
It made a difference, Campbell.
It did.
Thank you, yeah.
It made a difference.
I think it's something that is kind of overlooked at points. It doesn't really if it doesn't really apply, it just seems kind of minuscule. But I think from someone who's kind of seen the effect of that, and also from my peers who take a lot more honors classes than I do, that kind of really push themselves, I think it makes sense that that should be given credit. So I think I also really appreciate them listening to that idea, because I think
I do too.
that really does make a difference.
I think the process was very thoughtful, and then
Definitely.
they went back and reevaluated and stuff with it.
I do appreciate that
sure.
very much.
Indeed, sir.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Buenos noches.